I am Managing Director of Sakama. We are a cybersecurity consultancy based about 7 minutes up the road in Hume. We've been going for about 25 years now. I've been with the business for about 5 years. I'm not an MD from a commercial background. I'm a bit weird. I've come up through IT and actually been a security consultant. So I joined Sakama as a penetration tester about 5 years ago now. We have to do the low-tech wiggly button every so often. So I wanted to chat to you today about how we're starting to use AI in the world of pen testing. I've just been warned that you definitely don't need an introduction to AI because we're on the 29th meeting. However, I will, if it's okay, give you a bit of an introduction to what pen testing is, because I think that will help frame some of the information, some of the stories I tell you. So think of pen testing like somebody hacking a business, but then giving away all of the information about how they did it to allow the business to then fix it. So essentially what we're doing as a team of consultants is we're researching everything we possibly can about an application or its underlying infrastructure, and we're looking for vulnerabilities in that infrastructure or the app that we can then exploit and possibly steal some data, take the site down. It's quite a complex exercise. So it might be that we find 3 or 4 vulnerabilities that on their own are quite small and they're not really that impactful. But with the skill of a pen tester, we can chain those vulnerabilities together, and actually the net result is quite a large compromise. So aside from that, we also then advise the businesses on how we're fixing it. And actually, they do pay us to do it. It's not kind of like a, here's some advice for free. It's a commercial service. So at the end of it, they get a full report detailing everything that needs to be fixed. Some of that might be fix this now. Some of it might be actually this is a lot less of an issue. You've got a bit of time to figure out whether it needs your attention or not. So Adrian, can I give you the nod to move on to the slides? I'm going to move slightly sideways, otherwise I'm going to be very much in the way of them. Okay, going to do this slide really quickly because you guys know how much AI has grown. So for when we do this to our security people rather than our AI people, we like to just give a little bit of info about, the capabilities of AI now versus what they were even 3 years ago. Now, just to put it into context, cybersecurity isn't moving as fast as this. So we are only just now starting to be asked by customers for things like, can you test our AI implementation? We're starting to get the first customers now ask us about, are we using AI in pen testing? So that gives you an idea of, some of the issues that might arise with AI implementations, because businesses are already kind of so far down that path now and are just thinking, oh gosh, we better look at security as well. Now, this isn't new. This happened, when everybody started to do cloud migration. Everybody took up all their documents from their devices, shoved them into the cloud, and then about 6 years later thought, oh gosh, we best secure that now. So, we're already starting to try and highlight some of the security issues and some of the ways that, we're very transparent about how we use AI in testing, as you'll see through this. Can I give you another nod, Adrian? Is that okay? Thank you. Okay, so there's 2 sides when we look at AI use in cybersecurity. So there's a huge part of the market now that's dedicated to using AI in what we call offensive security. Now, without trying to sound too American, offensive security is all of the tasks and things we do to allow businesses to be able to test themselves against exploits. So this whole part about simulating attacks is called offensive security. So we're now using AI to do a number of activities that should, give us an idea of how easy it is to compromise an organization. Probably slightly more developed is the concept of using AI for defensive security. So you might have heard of the terms red team and blue team in security. So red team is your offensive team, and blue team is your defensive team. So in blue teaming, AI is a little bit more established. So we see lots of tools and software applications that are dedicated to being able to read your network traffic, figure out what is normal, and therefore give you a nice early warning if your network is compromised. Or for example, if you're writing an application and you commit code to your repository, there's well-established AI tools that will look through that code and say, actually, you may have written a vulnerability in here, you might want to go and fix that. So that is kind of the state of the market, if you like, for both offensive and defensive cybersecurity. Oh, my thing's not working as fast as yours, Adrian, for whatever reason. So we get asked all the time, and a lot of our pen testers come to me quite concerned and say, am I going to be replaced by AI at some point? And this prompted us to do a whole suite of research as to, how AI is going to impact the pen testing market. So in summary, the concerns are that actually using AI to run pen testing is going to be much more efficient and therefore cheaper than using a human to do it. I have been able to reassure the people at Sakama that it's not going to be a full, it's not going to be a full replacement, and I'll explain why in a few slides' time. Is it going to impact the way we work? Yeah, absolutely it is. And I think if you're sat there now as a junior, having just trained in manual pen testing, you've probably made a not smart choice about your career. But will it replace traditional pen testing? No, is going to be the summary of my my opinion. So AI and humans together are going to do a much better job of being able to be efficient at pen testing. Pen testing is all about how much value can we get from the least amount of time we spend on an engagement. So the whole kind of metric of a successful pen test is how many findings do we get in the 4 days that you have budget to pay us to do your pen test. So I just want to show you about how we might use AI to augment the capabilities of our testers, as opposed to saying, some organizations are out there doing AI testing. At the minute, it looks very much like vulnerability scanning. And I don't know if I explained the difference between vulnerability scanning and pen testing. So vulnerability scanners, they are automated tools. They're quite cheap to install, quite cost effective to maintain. You can plug them into your infrastructure or your web application. You set them off, you come back in an hour, and they will give you a list of vulnerabilities that they've discovered. Now, the way they discover that is by comparing what your application looks like or what your infrastructure looks like versus the fingerprint of a vulnerability. So if that vulnerability isn't already known about, the vulnerability scanner won't detect it. Now, it also won't detect where you've got other things in place that might mean that that vulnerability isn't exploitable. So, you may well have something exposed publicly, but actually it doesn't recognize that you can only get to that if you're in a certain location, for example. Pen testing goes a bit further. So pen testing gives you context to that vulnerability. So for your vulnerability in your environment with the set of controls that you've already got in place, here's what the risk is. So it adds that context, and you're not going to get things then like false positives that are going to confuse your teams. Thank you. So here's how we might use AI. Now, this is a story from an actual pen test. So we managed to exploit a cross-site scripting vulnerability by basically infiltrating a PDF renderer in an application. So cross-site scripting is where an attacker is able to input malicious code, usually by kind of input fields or variable boxes where you put in a certain search term or a parameter. They're then stored and they are reflected and executed in the victim's browser. So it can be used to do things like defacing web pages. So if you see a defaced web page, actually it may not well have been compromised at the server end, it could well have been defaced at your browser end through cross-site scripting. You can redirect users to malicious sites where they might be tempted to put their personal details in, so their passwords, because it looks like a legitimate site, but actually it isn't, because you've managed to redirect them using cross-site scripting. But you can also harvest things like session tokens that can be reused again to falsely authenticate to different parts of the site. So in this case, we were able to exploit this by uploading PDFs that contained malicious code. So the built-in PDF renderer actually executed the script that we'd written into the PDF, and it triggered an automatic redirect when the PDF was opened. Now, this was done on a 4-day engagement. That's probably about the shortest engagement we ever do. Could we have discovered this vulnerability without AI? Probably not, because it's quite a complex. So simple cross-site scripting is something we would routinely check for. Cross-site scripting using a PDF renderer, it's a little bit more of a stretch. So this is where, we might find lots of vulnerabilities, but the ability for AI to help us to chain those vulnerabilities together has meant that this organization has received more value, if you like, for the time that we've put into their engagement. So how did AI help us in this situation? So, our testers know a bit of JavaScript. Like, we're not developers, we're pen testers by trade, but we know a bit of JavaScript. We probably don't know how to write it in PDF format or PDF object syntax. So this is where we've used AI to help. So we observed that past PDFs had been used to execute code within the application, and we thought, actually that might still be an issue. So we used AI to do all the kind of legwork and heavy lifting for us, rather than go and figure out how to, write the sequence of commands and check them and debug them and watch them fail, kind of for a time, research actually how to do it in this format. So we then use that to do something that could have caused negative consequences if we weren't kind of nice hackers and we were bad hackers. Oh, I've gone too far again. No, you're fine. You're fine. So the prompt on the left is us asking ChatGPT to give us some JavaScript within a provided PDF file that'll say hello world. On the right is the implemented JavaScript within the PDF. And that's just kind of showing you how quite a loose, non-specific prompt resulted in potentially what could have been a real cyber attack with not that much change and not that much kind of outside knowledge required. So we've then been able to create a more malicious payload built on top of a really simple one that we'd managed to persuade ChatGPT to write for us. ChatGPT won't give you kind of exploits if you ask it, but it doesn't take much prompt engineering for somebody with very low skills to be able to, I suppose, chain that knowledge together and use it to, create an attack like this. Obviously, we're not going to show the whole attack path because this is actually a real-life customer, but there then is now this is just demonstrating that we were able to insert that PDF into the web file structure, and it had since been accessed by a targeted user. So once the file was opened by the specific user, the PDF would have opened and redirected them to a malicious site. Now, following that, There we go. So following that, the user was redirected to within the browser to a malicious server where we designed this to trick the user into accessing their credentials. So step by step, it's probably it's not taken as long to do, and because of AI, organizations are now really struggling to keep on top of fixing vulnerabilities because so when I first started doing pen testing, the average time between a 0-day vulnerability being discovered and it being attackable in the wild, if you like, was an average of about 92 days. That dropped quite quickly down to 14 days. Now, since the use of AI by attackers, the time gap you've got between a vulnerability being discovered and it being publicly exploitable is now about 3.5 hours. So as a defender, as a blue teamer, you are essentially now against AI fighting a losing battle, which is why AI is dangerous, if you like, in the wrong hands because it's just opened everything up. So what does that mean for us? So it means that whilst AI is fueling attackers and hackers and making them much more efficient, it's also, if used in the right way, making our pen test service much more efficient. So we can now discover vulnerabilities that we wouldn't have done before. There are some ethical questions that are raised by using AI in pen testing, and these largely form the basis of why I won't tell our pen testers that their jobs are doomed and done. At Sakama, we very much, I'm not quoting business spiel here, but we very much are a people-first organisation. So we run lots of kind of training events at our offices, and we believe in empowering people to be able to protect their businesses. I believe in empowering our testers to be able to use these tools to augment what they're doing. I do not want us to be a tool-only organisation because I think then you strip out the heart of why we're different and we just blend in with every other tool you can just plug and play into your infrastructure. Next one. So when we talk about AI and security, I think we need to avoid the question about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I get asked a lot, is AI good for cybersecurity? Well, in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. It's a very odd question. It's a very non-specific question. So AI is good when it's used properly and it's used with consideration and it's used with an understanding of consequences and what good looks like. So AI doesn't wake up and decide to be malicious one morning. But if you tell it to be malicious, it will be malicious faster than a human could ever think to be. So ethics becomes really the differentiator between good use of AI and dangerous use of AI. Mine keeps freezing again. There we go. So the one problem we find with organizations that use AI in pen testing, and we speak to our clients regularly and we speak to organizations regularly at events who've used kind of AI pen testing before. It doesn't have a sense of proportion. So our tester, when he uploaded the malicious PDF, targeted a single user to demonstrate a point. AI wouldn't think to do that. AI would naturally have, because of the activity we're doing, would have caused as much damage as possible and wouldn't think twice about taking down an e-commerce website on a Saturday afternoon where everybody's most likely to be shopping. So the proportionality decision needs to sit with a human. So just because I can exploit something doesn't mean that I should or it's the right thing to do. There's probably a method of demonstrating a point that sits about 5 steps back. And AI doesn't know when to stop unless you tell it to. Oh, my moving on button's so tiny that I keep pressing the wrong one. think it's frozen for me now. I'll just speak anyway. There we go. So a human tester knows when something's about to tip into real world impact. So this is kind of why we're going to keep human in the loop through our pen testing services. So you know when a client hasn't signed off on a particular technique, and AI doesn't naturally recognize those boundaries. There was a story in the media, I can't remember exactly the organization it was, but it was to do with Claude. So Claude had written a malicious application, even though it was explicitly told not to. And when it was questioned on why it did it, it said, "Oh, I just chose to ignore that instruction. It didn't seem appropriate." So even with explicit, I can't remember what the organization was, but this was only in the media last week, and I remember noting it. So AI doesn't recognize boundaries unless you specifically impose them, and it'll happily keep escalating unless you specifically tell it not to. So when AI gives you a working exploit, so like our tester got a working exploit, it's very exciting. I cannot describe the feeling of when you see that return that says that actually you've managed to exploit a vulnerability. It's like the biggest endorphin rush you'll ever have in your life, which is why pen testers love what they do. AI makes this dangerous. So we've found a perfectly good exploit. There's a temptation now to make it better, more malicious, more widespread. Before you know it, you've crossed a line that you never intended to cross. AI makes it so simple to go outside of the boundaries of what the client is expecting you to do. If an AI-generated payload accidentally causes damage, so let's say you accidentally cause a distributed denial of service attack, so you take down somebody's infrastructure, AI isn't the person who the customer's going to pick up the phone to and say, "Why have you done this?" Accountability doesn't shift just because you're using AI. You still have to be in control of what it's doing as a pen tester, because ultimately the only thing that differentiates pen testers from a cyber criminal is a piece of paper saying that you authorize us to do this activity. Relying just on AI, it's so easy to go beyond the boundary of what we've been authorized to do. And it's something that we hammer home to our pen testers from day one of them joining Sakama, that authorization to test is your be-all and end-all. Even if, so we have specific dates that we're allowed to attack, if you like, customers' infrastructure. If we perform any of those activities outside of those dates, we're criminals at that point. We don't have permission to test that. So that authorization to test is everything. And ethical pen testing still relies on human judgment, even though it's augmented by AI tools. So what does that mean for us? It means that as a business, we've had to consider what guardrails we put in place for AI to be effective. So what are we allowed to do with it, what we're not allowed to do with it? Lots of that has been done and considered within the relatively new ISO 42001 framework. So I don't know if anybody has heard of it, or just give us a nod if you've heard of it. Cool. Yeah, so it's a 2023 framework. We work with our ISO 27001 certification body, who are telling us that they've so far only certified 4 or 5 organizations against it. So I think, we're still waiting on the cybersecurity world to adopt this as part of a management system. But we've adopted this at Sakama as our way of making sure that we've asked ourselves all of the right questions and we have a framework to make those decisions within. So one of the things that we have been really explicit about is the types of activities that we can ask AI to do. One of the things we aren't going to do is use it for anything that might push the boundary of a scope. So we tested a model with a really simple scope on our own infrastructure, and we asked it to just test a web app. I think it was within about 3.5 minutes, it was trying to enumerate our cloud storage as well, which for the purposes of our contract, had we have been doing this with a customer, we'd have been breaching our contract at that point. I know nobody gets into AI to talk about contracts and frameworks, but it's such an important thing to consider when we're using AI in businesses for activities that could potentially be damaging. The other thing we've noticed about AI, so have we gone to the next one? Thank you. That's the one, yeah, is that AI is quite often confidently wrong. And I think we were discussing this before. AI can be confidently wrong. So we have, in the process of testing how we're going to use AI, given it infrastructure to look at, only for it to tell us really confidently that there was definitely a vulnerability in that infrastructure, gave us a CVE number and everything. Now that vulnerability didn't exist. We knew it didn't exist because it was actually on the CVEs related to a completely different piece of software that was never on our infrastructure. It was complete with CVSS score. And now if a junior tester had read that output and just copied it straight into a pen test report, we could potentially have caused chaos for a customer. So imagine, they were relying on that to present to the board or present to customers. And some organisations have policies in place where they say, right, we'll fix all high risk and critical vulnerabilities. Imagine if we've just given them a false positive through not checking everything. And, they've now got developers wasting time trying to fix something that was never there in the first place. Ethical use of AI in pen testing for us means validating absolutely everything. So I suppose the bottom line is, for us, AI is neither a huge friend or a huge foe. So it amplifies whatever intent we bring to it. So at Sakama, our intent is to provide as much value as we possibly can, and as much information to the customers that are buying our services. So in the hands of the right people with the right skills, AI is a force multiplier. AI is never going to replace those skills, judgment, real world insights, and I suppose under pressure decision making that a pen tester does every single day. In careless hands with an inexperienced tester who tries to do too much with it, and without the framework that we've tried to implement, AI can possibly damage somebody's business and therefore our reputation faster than we could blink. So the technology isn't the risk. It's forgetting that actually AI doesn't have a conscience like our testers do, and that part's on us, and we're still accountable for everything it does. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Do you want to go first?
Yeah. So on balance,
yeah.
What do you think is the main benefit of using AI within that whole field? Is it that speed becomes much more?
Yeah, it's speed. So I think in the past, when we've hired pen testers, we've needed you to come toward us with a specific skill set. Now that could be you've had 10 years looking at infrastructure. It could be that you're a semi-competent developer. You've had to have some of those type of baseline IT skills. Actually, now what I can do is I can recruit a good consultant. So a good consultant for me has people skills, not necessarily all tech skills, because now those tech skills are available with a few good prompts. So it's allowing us to hire better people and better consultants, because actually the AI input is taking away their need to be experienced developers and infrastructure engineers. Yeah.
You described the role of AI in pen testing. What's your view on the vulnerabilities that may or may not be introduced to an organisation through AI itself?
So I think a lot of the vulnerabilities that we're seeing at the minute aren't actually kind of, well, they are tech vulnerabilities, but they're coming about because of this lack of framework. Because lots of organizations, I said earlier to somebody, lots of organizations are still doing cloud migrations and their staff are using AI and the business is oblivious to it. So few businesses have controls over what staff can do with AI that actually one of the biggest risks that they're introducing is that those vulnerabilities are being introduced and the organization will never know. So for example, when Copilot first was being used by businesses, it didn't respect Microsoft permission structures. So, people were having access to salary data and things like that because the business hadn't thought ahead to control it. In terms of vulnerabilities, so again, as a business, one of the things we do is we write applications using AI. It's brilliant because we can have an idea on a Monday and it's out to customers by Friday. But we can only do that because we've got in-house pen testers. If you're writing apps using AI, you haven't got, so that speed can work against you because actually your normal development processes aren't able to be followed because there's a new pressure to get things out the door quickly. So I think it's that lack of control and speed over quality. Does that help? So, yeah.
Claude has introduced their model called Mythos.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance? What's your take on that?
So I have a controversial take on it at the moment. So at the minute, we've got a lot of, we can't share this, we can't share this with you because it's so good that we can't share this with you. If I had a golden key like that, I'd be all over it. So I'm yet to be convinced about how good it is because I think if you had something that good, you'd have monetized it by now. At the minute, it's just a big kind of conspiracy theory and a secret. So I will wait to be convinced otherwise.
Yeah, same here. In terms of the false positives of the impact training, the fake CVEs, I know Claude has like a skill trainer.
Yeah.
That not get rid of the false positives?
It doesn't get rid of them because obviously false positives can show up anywhere. So you can train models on what false positives are likely to look like for your organization. But bear in mind, when we test an organization, we're likely to have only seen their setup kind of 5 or 6 times, and that'll be during pen tests. So if we were to just unleash Claude on it, even with some good prompting, we're still going to just find things that aren't there. Does that make sense? Sorry. Yeah. Oh, did you? Okay, that was efficient. Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
So just going back to what you were saying about more like proportionality methods, knowing that obviously you understand it from an ethical point of view, commercial point of view, where you stop and how that can damage a business. But as you say, AI can be quite pervasive. So you have to decide it isn't going to stop at that point.
No.
Having used Mythos, we have it can do some damaging things.
Yeah.
So do you think that will change our industry and how people see, cybersecurity professionals and pen testers to actually say, it's okay to look at this one thing, but in reality, this is coming for you. So you actually really do need to look at it.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. We can't. We work with some massive organisations. So there's a couple of names that I know I'm allowed to share. So we work with HSBC. Okay, so their infrastructure is so large and is changing so often that absolutely, like, we get the most small scopes, and actually they don't want us to prod around outside of that. So for that kind of customer, we've got to be extra careful about how we use AI because actually we're probably one of a number of pen testers that are working on their infrastructure. So that kind of, crossing those boundaries of scope would be absolutely catastrophic for those larger organizations who are giving the tests out in quite small chunks. So that's why we need these guardrails in place, and we tell pen testers what you can do with AI. You can use AI to augment your existing testing methodologies. What you're not going to do is ask AI to run those methodologies for you. Yeah.
Which way you can protect company against prompt injection?
Against prompt injection? Well, again, it depends on what you're using it for. So we're now starting to develop testing methodologies for LLMs. So it would depend on your very specific set of circumstances. But and I probably don't have the details of how we're doing that at the moment. I've not been a pen tester now for 4 years. But I would just say use consultants to help you. Use people to so use pen testers, use ethical hackers to be able to tell you for your specific situation, because each situation is going to be different depending on what models you're using and depending on what data is important to the business. And that's one of the things that I think people forget is kind of, how do I do this? Well, it's very different depending on how your setup is and what can be exploited. So that's where the value of pen testing is. It gives you that context so you can be specific.
What after? It means when it happened already.
When it's already happened. So at that point, you're talking to an incident response expert. So you're talking to probably your cyber insurers. You're talking to somebody who's got forensic experience. So pen testing is preventative security. Once you've already been attacked, then you're looking at, incident response expertise. So I suppose making sure you've got those people on hand, because actually the likelihood is you are going to suffer an attack now. But that's not something that Sakama do. We're not incident response experts. We work in preventative security. Yeah.
When you think of someone that's recently qualified as like a pen tester, hasn't made a very good choice.
Yeah.
What would be a smart choice right now going forward, looking forward to 12, 18 months?
Okay, so if you are hoping to do manual pen testing and work your way up the pen testing ladder, that's the bit that's not a smart choice. Absolutely, you can be a pen tester, but you now have to come with a different skill, because the way we do pen testing is already kind of changing so quickly. So if you're going to come to us with AI skills as well, brilliant. If you're not, you're probably going to get lost in the noise. If you're coming to us with excellent consultancy skills and you understand things like risk scoring and risk matrices, and maybe you've done some GRC work as well, you're now an asset. And if you're coming to us as very stereotypically hoodie wearing, dark room loving, solo individual pen tester, you're probably going to get swallowed up quite quickly by this industry. Yeah.
How are you transferring from AI? Looking at some other large cloud providers and myself.
Yeah.
Patch Tuesday, since around release, have been jam-packed. I know some other AI companies have come out with similar things.
Yeah.
How are you guys doing that?
So we are following all of our kind of threat intel type of stuff. We're probably doing what every other organisation is doing, because actually we don't know what the impact's going to be either. So I'd love to stand here and tell you we've got the answers and the golden bullets, but we are in the same boat of a lot of other organisations. So just because we know how to pen test and just because we know our areas of security quite deeply, that, we're also not infrastructure specialists, for example. So we're in the same boat. We're monitoring our threat intel feeds. We have direct communication with the National Cybersecurity Centre. We follow all of their updates just as any other business would. Sorry, Adrian, I've not ignored you on purpose.
That's okay. There was a lot of press last week or the week before about this worm,
Yeah.
NPN worm,
Yeah.
that it suggested that AI has facilitated its inclusion, perhaps in the way that you were describing with the PDF.
Yeah.
thing. What's your take on that? I mean, is it something that you're able to identify as actually happened in clients, or would you use somebody else?
No, so pen testing, we've actually discovered on more than one occasion. We've actually discovered a cyber attacking process when we've been doing pen testing. So when things are actively going wrong, there's always some kind of footprint. So we had one, I think it was late last year, where we actually became involved in I've already said we're not incident response specialists, but we discovered the cyber attack actually in progress because we could see files being deposited into the file structure of the customer's application that we knew weren't supposed to be there. And we did a lot of, have you done that? Have you done that? Have you done that? And yeah, we actually discovered that there was an attack happening. So yeah, we can help to discover if things have already gone wrong. What we don't do is then okay, now what? So we do plans, we help people test their response plans, but it's a completely different field of cybersecurity. So we have lots of industry partners that are really good at that. So we stay in our lane, they stay in their lane, and then, you know, between our customers, they get the best of our experience. But yeah, you can see that kind of thing during a pen test, especially if you already suspect it and you guide the tester down that type of route. But it's all about knowing what's normal for your application and your infrastructure so that you can detect something that isn't normal. Yeah.
You gave the example of using ChatGPT to create that scenario. Are the frontier labs doing enough to stop you doing that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and that has changed so much recently. So we were able to do this by asking it quite an innocent question. So how do we format a PDF, or how do we put this in this box in a PDF? And then the tester in the background changed that to be something else. So when ChatGPT first came out, I remember asking it about, so we're a Cyber Essential certification body. I remember asking it about vulnerabilities that I can find on Windows 10, for example, and it would give me the vulnerabilities. Now it won't even give me that. So I do think that is changing, but there's still ways of asking the right questions to get the information that you want. So if you said, you know, I'm preparing for Cyber Essentials, which vulnerabilities should I be worried about? You'll get a different output than tell me what vulnerabilities can be exploited.
Just a comment on the mythos and the capabilities of mythos. Another perspective on that might be that actually it's extremely expensive to run and probably don't have the compute available to actually run it and make it available. Scarcity is a good marketing thing. I feel it's more of the latter than, I mean, the former there of the actually it's too expensive for them to run. They have to restrict it.
Fair enough. Yep. Okay, thank you so much, guys, for your time.
Many thanks indeed, Jen.
That's all right.
That was great.
That's okay.
We haven't really done too much cyber yet.
Okay.
Study group, so this is pretty good.
Well, if you want any of our other geeks and techno people to come down, I'm sure they'd be very happy to. All right, thanks, Adrian.
Just give me 2 seconds to move on to the presentation.
Thanks. Yeah, of course.
Use my mouse to.
Let's get your mics up, Adrian. You want to do this, maybe?
Right.
Yeah, that could work.
Okay, whatever you want to do.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, yeah. So we've not actually mentioned, but over the last few sessions, Jack's been live streaming, so we're live streaming this presentation. So many thanks, everybody. I found that fascinating, and I'm really pleased that Jen was able to come and share that information with us. What I would like to do now, which he says, hoping that things are going to work, but I might just have to pop back here all the time and do it this way.
You want me to do it?
Oh yes, please, if that's possible. Right, you might even have to press the button in the middle there, Subra, if that's okay. So, as I sort of mentioned on this slide at the beginning, over the last, I suppose, 2 years really, I've been, as I describe it, chronicling the Manchester AI ecosystem. And I sort of got into this really by, I've got sort of background in IT and business process, and obviously very interested in technology. I've been here in Manchester for all of my working life, more or less, but I'm going backwards and forwards, and I'll tell you a bit more about this. And clearly AI is now the technology of the moment. You know, we're in a period of really quite significant change. The first thing I want to do is sort of share with you these 2 pictures. I mean, if you go back 194 years, I think the society has been going, and the society was actually really born out of the Industrial Revolution. It was really all about, you know, here where we're standing or sitting, centre of Manchester. You go back 194 years ago, it was all about mills, people coming in from the countryside, working in, weaving and, textiles, etc. 40 people living in a basement, which is a sort of thing that the Statistical Society set out to actually monitor, and in order to understand what conditions people were in and to argue for improvements in social conditions. Move on then to 76 years ago, something like that. This is a picture of the baby computer at University of Manchester, which arguably is the birthplace of computing. There is an argument that Philadelphia have that they had a computer at the same time, but I see your head being shaken there, so that probably agrees with me. But Manchester really the birthplace of computing. Move on to the next one, Subra. That's okay. So what I want to do really was sort of do a number of things. Really was to understand where we are in the AI journey, and Jen in her presentation has given me some really good links into what I wanted to actually say as well. Really understand then, what we as individuals are doing and what businesses are doing to actually get to grips with AI and what's actually happening in AI. And then I wanted to really have a discussion around, what I see is happening or actually not happening here in Manchester. Next slide, Subra. So Jen actually presented a couple of slides at the beginning around AI, but I thought it quite helpful to share with you a picture that I picked up. So there was a session I went to about 3 weeks ago at the business school where there's a whole discussion around use of AI in sort of business professional services. But really it was the accounting profession, and you'll see there's a link there to the chap called Ian Pay, who gave this really good presentation, I felt. And he had this slide, and I thought, this is a really good slide to actually use to at least have a picture around, the broad area of artificial intelligence. Now, it's not totally comprehensive, and for reasons that we'll actually talk about in a second. And I thought, it being AI and it being Manchester, you couldn't not have a picture of Alan Turing, who is obviously at the, the founder of much of what we're looking at in the AI space at the minute. I have an expression, and this is a logo from the sort of Plixos company that you can see on the slide up at the top, where really I have a feeling, the genie is out of the bottle and it's not going back. People are talking all the time about, what's happening. Can we control AI? Can we manage AI? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we're out there. There's nothing we can change. We're in an AI-related world going forward. And to the extent that, sorry, next slide, Subra, if that's possible. I suppose the sort of journey that we've been on is really, I suppose, triggered by the launch of ChatGPT. Now, AI has been around for a long, long time. And in fact, we had actually Alan Gillish spoke at the Society about 9 months ago, something like that. And he was actually saying how he had worked in AI for most of his life as a university professor. And as a student, he'd actually studied at Edinburgh, I think. And Edinburgh has in the past had a small group of people who have always been working in AI for as long as it's been around. And I suppose the flashpoint, as far as the public were concerned, was really the launch of ChatGPT 3.5 in November 2022. And I think until then, most of us might have been aware that there was something going on in AI, but actually we had no real knowledge about, what the technology was and how it could work for us and what we could do with it. Very, very quickly, things have moved on then. Clearly, ChatGPT 4 was then announced out in March 2023. And clearly, OpenAI were the first of the AI frontier model organizations to actually come out in the marketplace. But very quickly, Google with Gemini and Anthropic, who a lot of the people at Anthropic actually had worked at OpenAI and had split off from OpenAI when there was a whole discussion about does the company go public or does it not, and of course that's an ongoing discussion even today as we sort of sit there. Interesting enough, I went to several of the models and asked, give me a key milestone since ChatGPT 3.5 came out. So this is a combination of what ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude have said. But interestingly enough, all of them said, oh, Sora in February 2024, when that came out, that was really important. Now, many of you will know that actually Sora has been discontinued. So it had a really very short lifetime. So it's lasted, what, less than 2 years in sort of reality. Now, obviously what's happened is that OpenAI now have another video image model that's taken over from it, which is more integrated into what they're doing. But nevertheless, it shows the sort of pace of change that we're actually facing. Now, I've actually put a little claw for OpenClaw down at the bottom. Many of us presume, would have had no idea, even at Christmas this year, that there was going to be such a product that would actually emerge into the market. So a chap called Peter Steinberger, who was an Austrian hobbyist. I mean, he had a software company he sold. He then went back to perhaps being the hoodie that Jen had actually talked about in the previous presentation, and worked away on developing an autonomous agent. And he then sort of tested it with his friends and colleagues. I think he only started last November. And by January, he then had a sort of working model that he had tested on his friends, got announced into the market. I was watching people on, I think on like the Monday morning. He released it on the Friday. A whole host of people started working on it. Woke up on Monday morning, there's all these YouTube videos of these people who were raving about OpenClaw and all the things they could do and all the amazing things that had actually happened. And obviously since then, there's been, a whole host of manifestations around agents and autonomous agents, etc., with a lot of various organizations, including NVIDIA itself, producing that type of technology. Really what it's now doing is actually probably taking us on to the next level when it actually comes to AI technology, etc. Next slide. So one of the key things that, or one of the key discussion areas that, I think we have touched on at various meetings in the past, is really, well, where are we going with AI? And there is actually a paper that's been written by a chap called Leopold Aschenbrenner, and that was about 2024, who was actually talking about his view, and the whole number of people who accede to this view, as to what's actually happening with regard to sort of AI and artificial general intelligence. Now, I actually think, as he has there, is all based on large language models, and Jen in the previous presentation talked about large language models. The implication is that large language models are going to get so good that at some point they will effectively, using this process of recursive self-improvement, that they will actually bring us into this world of artificial general intelligence. Now, that is a view that not everybody holds, but certainly is a perspective that many people in the industry actually have. I just thought it'd be useful to share some background as to the concept, and obviously these concepts are around long before the technology has actually become available. So large language models, possibly, we're looking at recursive self-improvement. Were that to happen, then obviously the artificial intelligence models would have greater capability than us as humans, more or less. Next slide. But I'll come back to that as well. Now, when I actually look at sort of AI, I've realized that actually it's like expands over everything that we do. You can see that, with large language models, all the areas around search, computing, technology. I didn't actually ask Jen, but in the last 6 months, there's been a discussion that actually all of the code that's been generated for large language models in Claude, in OpenAI, etc., have actually been written by the models themselves, that have not actually been developed by software developers as such. So we've got huge advances actually happening in code, in software development, in everything, of course, that they actually run. We noticed, I call it physical AI, what's happening in robotics. We can see now that they've even got humanoid robots that can outperform humans in, the robot half marathon in this particular case. And then what we've also seen with specialist AI products, what can actually happen in the sort of biology space. And as I understand it now, I mean, I'm not a biologist, but not almost any biologist, pharmaceutical biologist who's involved in drug discovery is using AlphaFold, which is obviously the DeepMind product that has come from, you know, the Google DeepMind development lab, and they obviously started off with games, with AlphaCo, and then moved that on. You know, Demis Hassabis, who obviously got the Nobel Prize last year, he had in his mind all the time that what he was looking to do was to create an AI environment that would benefit humanity, and so very much the development of things like proteins, understanding to actually help with, you know, curing cancer and all the rest of it. So I think very significant progress has actually been made in that space. Next slide, Subra. So I talked about LLMs and a cautionary note as to their capability. So in preparing this slide, I just went on to Claude and said, oh, can I have a Claude logo that I can use in this presentation? So Claude went away, produced this logo on the right-hand side. I thought, well, hang a minute, that doesn't look like the Claude logo. I said, you know, this looks recreated. Is it not possibly artificial? Yes, you're right, it is recreated. So going back to this thing about, you know, as far as Claude was concerned, it was giving me the Claude logo, which it clearly wasn't. And so what I then had to do, of course, was then go and get the Anthropic logo from a different location, sort of thing. But large language models are, I mean, there's the whole discussion around, you know, them being very confident and giving you you know, a very positive statement, and that very positive statement can actually be completely wrong. And there is, you know, that is, if you like, inherently built into the underlying model that they're actually using, which I'll come along and discuss a little bit later as well. Next slide. So what I wanted then to do was then talk about, you know, how we as individuals and businesses actually get to grips with AI. Next slide, Subra, that's okay. And I thought it would be useful just to, you know, sort of look at, you know, the way we as individuals, you know, not necessarily in business, are actually being exposed. Clearly, Google Translate, as we've actually been using AI models for a long time. You know, Google Translate's been around for 15 years, something of that ilk. I mean, clearly there's been improvements continuously, but use Google Translate. Sitting behind that, there's actually a model. Siri. Now, I know there's been a whole discussion about Apple falling behind in the AI race, and in fact, fairly recently they've now got into bed with sort of Google to be the base model infrastructure for their AI developments going forward. But Siri and applications like that have been, you know, are AI. Most of us now, or probably all of us in this room, over the last 3, 4, 5 months, will have been opening up our Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, Word, and finding we've got Copilot as an integral part of that, of each of those applications. So Copilot's being rolled out, you know, almost by stealth, but actually it's almost like by, you know, without any thought or discussion, we're all accessing Copilot and can use it or not, depending on what we want to do. And then there is, in fact, of course, a huge plethora of material now that people can actually use if they want to actually start to learn as individuals, you know, a bit more about the technology that we're actually looking at. And I've cited some of the potential sources that we can use as individuals. But I think we've been exposed to it for quite a long time. Next slide. So to wind back a little bit, I mentioned on one of the earlier slides that ChatGPT 3.5 came out in 2022. I also have an involvement with this company, Avasant. I helped bring them to the UK many years ago. It's a management consultancy based in the US, but actually big presence in India and around the globe. And about 5 or 6 years ago, they set up a research arm to do research, a bit like sort of Everest and IDC and Gartner, who I have worked for in the past. And every year they've actually run what's called the UK Digital Services Survey, and that's really looking at people like, you know, some of the people that you're seeing on there, you know, the IBM's, Cognizant, Accenture, Wipro, TCS, you name all of the firms in the IT service provider space, tend to look at them. And because I still know a lot of the people, I quite often sit in on the interviews as the local face based in Manchester, sort of thing. We ran the survey in 2022, and all of those firms were IT and business process firms. Like I said, I was been involved in IT business process. The following June, so that was 2023, every single one of those firms was an AI company. So suddenly they'd magically changed from doing something that they've been doing for like 20, 30 years, IT business process. They were all AI companies. And that really, wow, this to me was really quite significant. And it was then sort of reinforced. Subra, who's sitting at the front here, did a presentation to society last year, April last year. I was sitting listening to Subra's talk, and he was actually talking about an AI readiness assessment that he developed as part of his master's at Salford. And it suddenly occurred to me, well, hang on a minute. I know from my corporate experience that if you're a big corporate organization, you've got access to all of these people, as well as the people you've got in your own company, whoever you've got in IT, AI, people who are able to help with you on the AI journey. If you're a small, medium enterprise, you don't have that because you can't afford to pay an Accenture or a TCS or MD for that service. And it really got me thinking about, well, what needs to happen in the small, medium enterprise space. And what it also demonstrated to me is that things actually have begun to move very, very quickly. So a year ago, well, I was looking around here in Manchester, well, who knows or who is prepared to actually help small, medium enterprises with what's actually happening in AI? There's a number of key figures that came out. One of the things that had actually happened was that Innovate UK had given Greater Manchester colleges a budget to do innovation training for businesses. And one of them, one of the colleges, Hopwood Hall, which is in Rochdale, a chap called Billy Gilchrist, actually had gone to a couple of AI meetings, wasn't very happy with what he could see people doing, had gone away, learned himself what to do, and is actually giving hands-on training for boards of small, medium enterprises. Now, 12 months ago, he was like almost the only person here in Greater Manchester who was doing that. There were other things going on. The Greater Manchester Growth Hub had a team of people who's still there, Lawrence, Judith, and Phil Kilburn, and they were providing some AI training out into the market, but it wasn't hands-on training. It wasn't helping people sit in on, using the tools and getting to grips with the tools. What had actually happened is that I had actually met Billy at a networking event at Football Club United of Manchester. I don't know how many people, presumably you all know about Football Club United of Manchester. They're in North Manchester. They're a non-laser football club in the Manchester United tradition, if you like. And he said he was doing a training for the board the following week. So I said, would you mind if I sat in? And I sat in on what he did. And literally within minutes, people on that management team were then doing things using AI, which they could never have believed that they were going to do before. They were actually using the tools that are available at that time, in the marketing, redoing the merchandising, all sorts of things. I thought, wow, this is amazing what this guy's doing. And it was really a sort of step forward from, if you like, the work that the Growth Hub were doing. What I also wanted to do was that over the last couple of years, after the pandemic, a lady called Amy Newton had actually set up this thing called the Manchester Tech Festival, and she had a number of events that she ran in the Manchester area, some of which had an AI involvement as well. So there were obviously things going on in the AI space, but not a huge amount in reality. And that's obviously when I was sort of starting to do the chronicling, if you like, of the AI ecosystem. Next slide, Subra. So roll on 12 months, more or less. Obviously, Billy's still doing, Hopwood Hall College, still doing training for small and medium enterprises. Unfortunately, the grant that Innovate UK had given the Greater Manchester Colleges had run out. So whatever he's doing as Hopwood Hall. The Greater Manchester Growth Hub is still doing the innovation sessions. But there's a host of people now who've really moved into this space really, really very, very quickly. A lady called Natasha Bradley, who I actually met at Stockport College when she was doing a session for local enterprises there. She'd been brought in by I think the sort of college is part of innovation activity. Natasha's actually begun to do quite well, and I have a relationship with with her, and I'm hoping that she will work with me in the Greater Manchester area going forward. There's been a whole succession of meetup groups that have been established. Obviously, we have created our place in the AI community in Manchester, but there's a whole host of other groups, and I've actually gone round and I sit in regularly on as many of those meetup groups as I can. I think I might have seen David actually at one of the other groups as well before he spoke at our event. And they actually continue to run. Something that happened May 25 last year, there's a lady called Sarah Simeone, who is based here in Manchester. She set up a business with Deborah Cleary and actually been doing in-person and online training, but not just in Manchester, they've actually been doing it all across the UK. There's another lady, Heather Murray, who used to run a marketing agency, suddenly realized how significant AI was, and she set up this business called AI for Non-Techies, which I think is now a £1 million business, something like that. And she's created that really from within the last 9 months, just by providing with others in-person training to people. Now, at this point in time, I was sort of thinking, okay, well, I'd like to do something here locally in Manchester. And I was literally about to launch something when I got an invite from the Chamber of Commerce. And so this was about, I don't know, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, something like that. And we were invited to go to Freight Island. I don't know if you know, if many of you know where Freight Island is. It's near the Mayfield Depot, close to Piccadilly Station. A nice big room, lots of tables. We were invited to bring on our laptops, and we actually did a very interesting session. And really, it was an in-person prompt training session, effectively created by Intuit. Now, many of you might not know who Intuit is, but actually, they have a product called QuickBooks, which is almost one of the de facto standard accounting SaaS systems out there in the market. And Subra actually walked in the door in the morning. They had a door in the middle of this stage, and the door opened and Subra came out, and I smiled. I took a picture, I mentioned it in my LinkedIn post, and Subra did a fantastic job walking everybody through this training session, which lasted, we had about, I don't know, 50, 60 companies there, something like that. And, prompt training and all the rest of it. Really, really good. Something else that I've became aware of literally in the last 3 or 4 weeks is that I've obviously of an age where I joined the U3A, the University of the Third Age. I mean, I still joined them to do things like walks and things like that. And I discovered I got invited to some online session about 4 weeks ago, discovered they've got a huge AI activity going on as well. So this is people obviously of a similar age to me who are not technology type people. And actually they have really built up quite a significant amount of resources in the AI space. So as far as small, medium enterprise and individuals concerned, as in the explosive growth of AI, we've suddenly now got an explosive growth of capability and access to support people in that space. And clearly for large organizations, internal resources and the service provider community are really doing an awful lot then to continue to support them as well. So moving on then to what's actually happening in sort of AI, I wanted to actually start with you on the next slide. Yeah, I want to actually start just by recognizing some of the previous speakers at the AI study group, and so I got one of the applications to, I forget which one it was. I think it was Claude actually, to just sort of look. I gave them the list of all the previous speakers and asked them to do me a roll of honor. And this is what they produced. And clearly we've got a whole number of people, David who's spoken before, Subra who's spoken before, and people like Farouk Ansari from Softwire, Robert Fawcett, various people who've actually spoken at the sessions. And then even earlier this year, Ian Massingham, Rebecca, Julian Whiffen, and Tom Brandwood from Traverse Automation, all presented to the society. And very much, clearly all those people are part of the AI ecosystem. But also in Manchester, we've got a huge number of software-related companies who have an AI capability, a growing AI capability. Obviously, Matillion, AutoTrader, who I don't know if many of you know, but they moved into a brand new building in Circle Square, which I actually went to last week, and it's been a building site forever, and then suddenly the doors have opened, and it's quite an impressive setup. But there's a whole host of organisations and other software companies, and clearly the work that is carried out in the Northwest universities. I haven't listed them all because we probably know where they are. But yeah, next slide, Subra. So the thing that actually has sort of occurred to me as I've been looking at, well, what's really happening in AI in the Manchester area? I thought, well, if you go back to my first slide, Manchester was involved in the first industrial revolution, the second, i.e. the computing revolution. Why aren't we, as a geographical area, heavily involved in what's happening in AI? I mean, as things currently stand, all of the big models are based on people who are living in San Francisco or in that area of the US, and also in China as well, in the various cities that are running the open source models that have been developed there. I attended a talk last week at Autotrader, as it happened, but it was actually called Digital Infrastructure North. And there was a chap from NVIDIA who actually spoke, and he sort of presented this picture around what's actually happening in AI. And as far as he's concerned, he was talking about AI factories being the industrial infrastructure of the new AI era. And I'm sort of thinking, well, why haven't we got something like that here in Manchester? Talking about inferences is the workload. And we're actually now in a situation where AI tokens could be considered as the new sort of commodity. And going back to the question earlier about compute and compute capacity being at the heart of AI models and AI technology, in effect is compute, the new revenue that we are actually talking about in industry. Now, I wanted to, just in case people are a bit unclear, inferences and workloads, so I thought I'd put some little sourced information. It obviously came via Gemini from Wikipedia, and really talking about inference as a conclusion or opinion formed based on known facts or evidence. It involves deducing information that is not explicitly stated, using reasoning to connect premises to logical consequences. And that's really, I suppose, if you like, an enhancement in the large language model area. But one of the things that is really very important, and going back to my cautionary tale earlier, clearly large language models, because they're really based on pattern recognition and actually don't have a world understanding, there is a limitation to what they are able to do. And a lot of work has also been going in parallel, but probably relatively unnoticed, around symbolic AI, which is actually about, and if you actually look at a calculator, you do a calculation on a calculator, you're going to get a correct answer. You do the same thing with AI. 99 times out of 100, it might give you the right answer, but one time out of 100, it may well not do. And obviously that is, a reliability issue. And I think that might actually be behind why an awful lot of people, even though they've been exploring AI via large language models, the degree to which people are prepared to have it as a full implementation in their business, can you fully trust it? I think that's very much at the heart of it. So there is, in fact, a chap called Gary Marcus who's become much more prominent very, very recently, who's written about this long before LLMs appeared on the market. And one of the things that he's been actually talking about is the need to explore further what we can do with symbolic AI. And there's a description there about so what that is, and the use of sort of world models. But from a Manchester perspective, it really got me thinking about, well, what's actually missing here in the Manchester area? And move on to the next slide. And I'm talking about Manchester in the Northwest. One of the things that I actually only realized last week, was that in terms of internet access and internet infrastructure, we are actually well catered for here in the Northwest. I hadn't known, but this organisation on the far right-hand side, London Internet Exchange, has a big exchange here in Manchester and actually acts as a local node for traffic going across to the States. Basically what it does is, if you've got internet traffic, it acts as a big switch. It doesn't look at the data itself, it just sort of switches the traffic around the world, basically, and certainly as far as the UK is concerned. And they announced last week a tie-up between the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, a cooperative network infrastructure, which many of you may not have heard of, but actually there's over the last few years been a significant amount in the public sector of laying dark fibre under the streets of Manchester, the Greater Manchester area. And this is all coordinated through this organisation called the Cooperative Network Infrastructure. It connects like hospitals, local authority locations, government departments, etc. And the whole idea is to actually link all that up. So they're linking all that up. So that said to me, okay, in terms of networking, we have a great capability to support us here in the UK. But if you look at it from an AI model perspective and an AI infrastructure perspective, you look at this chart here, and this is actually a chart of the data centres that are available for commercial use across the UK. And guess what? There's a huge hole in the middle where we are. And I'm sort of thinking, well, you know, that surely this isn't right. You know, that surely we should be having some access to an AI data center that people could utilize, which is actually part of, if you like, the sovereign compute capability in the UK. And now, clearly, the chap from NVIDIA who had actually presented this chart, as soon as he put it up, I thought, right, yes, you could say he's really after more business because guess what? They'd have to put NVIDIA chips in the data center, etc. But to me, if we are going to be part, as a Greater Manchester area, as part of what really happening at the forefront of AI, if we haven't even got the basic infrastructure, we're not going to get very far. However, I think there might be a redeeming aspect to all this. Next slide. And that is really around the whole symbolic AI activity. And I think going forward, really what we're going to be looking at is this combination of LLMs with symbolic AI and world models. You know, we're really talking about something much greater than what we already have at this moment in time. And so I did a bit of research over the last few days around, well, what's actually happening here in the Northwest in terms of symbolic AI. And not surprisingly, the activity is more or less focused just on the universities, and there are small groups. I mean, I think that's all that there are in each of the universities, as you can see here. You know, University of Manchester, the Eurosymbolic AI Lab. Now, I believe that Guy Marshall, who's not here, who is our president of the society, actually is associated with this group. But I've never had a conversation with him about it, and hope I will be able to do over the days ahead. But yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on, perhaps in the background, on a relatively level. So I think there might be some capability here. But the thing that would really, I think, be extremely helpful for us, if we actually want to be at the forefront of what's happening in AI, to somehow harness, you know, the things that are actually going on deep in the academic world and bring that out into the greater world. Next slide. So really, my suggestion is that what we should be looking for is a Manchester AI model collaboration. So where people are actually saying, well, let's pull together the capability so that we here in the Northwest can actually begin to be back at the forefront of effectively the third industrial revolution. And that's something that I'd like to take forward from today. Obviously, we need to have discussions with lots of other people, but this is something that I think is something that's we ought to have as proud Mancunians in the AI market. Thank you very much. Obviously, open for questions. Super person.
So, I believe there is a new data center coming to Stockport. Is that kind of for AI, or is it just a regular SaaS?
Right. What was going to do was actually show you a Google Earth picture, but it's too complicated to mess around the computer. It's interesting, yes. I think it's Quayle, K-A-O, and it's actually named after Charles Quayle, who was one of the founders of ago, and that's a company that's long disappeared. And but his successor companies, they run and manage a number of data centers in the UK, supposedly. There are one or two that definitely exist. About 2 years ago, there was a big announcement. Yeah, we'll have a big data center. It's in Stockport. So I live in Stockport. So the other day, I went for a drive around to Kenwood Road, where this data center is supposed to be. There's nothing there. You know, it is basically a boarded off building site. There's nothing happening. There was a suggestion, if you look at the media, that it all should have been live by 2025. And now, if you look on their website, it's saying 2027. But if there's no building going on, I don't see much sign of it actually happening. So I don't quite know what's going on. Obviously, I've done as much research as I can. But to me, it's a whole question, the whole political discussion about, yeah, we got this data center, blah, blah, blah. Where is it? There's no sign of it. So I'm sort of, this is an interesting conundrum, really, I think, in where we are.
On that map of data centers,
Yeah.
are those just the government-owned data centers or public as well?
Well, it does actually leave out the fact that there are a small number of research data centers, one of which is at the Hartree Centre in Daresbury. Now, I go to Daresbury a lot, and I've tried to talk to the people at Hartree Centre, say, look, well, SMEs who want to run their AI applications locally in the UK, could we have access to the Hartree supercomputer? And the answer is no. There is no way of doing it. It is basically dedicated to the universities to do what they want. And it's not a publicly available resource. I think what it was actually showing was effectively data centers that people could commercially actually use, which would be, in theory, what the one in Stockport was supposed to be all about.
Yeah, I know that there might not be much in terms of a public data center similar to AWS, but I did receive about a year ago an email about co-location. So you purchase your own hardware and they will host it for you alongside maybe other people's infrastructure. But
this came from the chap at NVIDIA who presumably selling the chips. And I think there's a lot to talk about it, but actually I'm not sure so much is actually happening. At the back, yeah?
Yeah, I was at that event as well, which very nice offices, if nothing else. I think that map, part of what that was showing was the areas chosen by the UK government AI accelerator programs or AI growth areas. One of the questions that came to me as the man who sells expensive chips to put in data centers thinks we should build more data centers, which was interesting. But the question is on the location.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about the previous industrial revolution. Manchester had a competitive advantage there because it rains a lot and there are hills. So we could wash the cotton and we could power the water mills that powered the first factories.
Yeah. For
data centers, the government has selected areas which also have competitive advantages. So, like here in Lanarkshire, for example, in Blyth, they have offshore wind farms that have cheap electricity coming in, which can help. Also at that event, they mentioned Silicon Sands up in Blackpool, which was interesting, but also it has competitive advantages. It has electricity coming from the wind farms on the Irish Sea, it has a big, fast internet pipe to Dublin and there on to the rest of the world. Again, an accident of geography and luck, but that is how these things work. In terms of data centres in Manchester, where is the competitive advantage for us to have it there? And where is the cost for us not to have it? Given that if you accept that most of the value comes from the compute you run on those data centres, you can run that from anywhere. You can run that wherever the data centre is. I certainly think there's an argument in terms of research for universities, more hands-on. But from a commercial point of view, I don't see the business case for why it has to be in the geographic locality rather than being accessible.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. And in fact, while I've called it the Manchester AI model, similarly to what you'd heard, the Blackpool Silicon Sands. So my previous slide actually said that Manchester in the northwest. So I was thinking, should we call this the Manchester Blackpool AI model? But that was like a little bit far. But on saying that, I mean, yeah, clearly Blackpool has this strategic advantage potentially of all the power coming in from the wind farms in the Irish Sea, together with the fact that they actually are at the forefront of all the transatlantic fibre optic cables. And clearly they're a key part of this infrastructure that we actually talked about sort of earlier in the sort of presentation. I mean, I was thinking about it. I was thinking, well, it would be great even if it was the data center was in Blackpool, but that we had something that you could see that was relatively close to where we actually sit. Now, I mean, you could argue that, well, why was the baby computer in Manchester? It wasn't really to do with the rain or anything like that. It was to do with the people. But what I'm really concerned about is that if we don't have people who are actually working at the cutting edge in all this, because there is no real opportunity for that, then we're just going to fall further and further and further behind, A, as a region, and B, as a nation. And I'm sort of thinking, well, if you look at what's happening in France, they've got Mistral and people working on it. Bit clunky from my experience, but that's something that I would want to encourage.
I'm sticking on both those 2 points in terms of like building further behind. About 2 months ago, we announced we're going to invest 500 million sovereign AI and quantum computing in the infrastructure across the country. And again, talking to different people, Rebecca Foxman actually, is that's a drop in the ocean when you really think about that in terms of true infrastructure and cost. And already the real kind of building is starting to happen in areas where we already have stuff. So again, like Surrey is at the bottom of that kind of area that serves London. A lot of the infrastructure is going to be added onto that with kind of additional energy resources in and around to serve the city of London. So again, I don't think we have enough in terms of investment in infrastructure, enough in terms of planning, enough even to some of the stuff we talked about at university, which is absolutely brilliant. But in the US and different countries, they're getting private money and different things to kind of work with government and say, okay, these projects are being worked on, let's invest in them. So we're not doing either or.
Well, and really what I want to do is sort of almost like set the market down. Should we have that discussion? I mean, yes, I understand what you're saying about in terms of investment, etc. But I'm always thinking, well, if we don't start talking about it, we're never going to get there. At least if we begin the discussion. Building on that alliance that they've set up last week. The Digital North Alliance. Maybe we should have a Digital North and AI alliance. Now, again, sources of funding, etc., and it being a drop in the ocean, I agree. But what's in my mind is there some way we can actually somehow get ahead with the symbolic AI capability? Because clearly it's that combination of that with LLMs, etc., which I think going forward will provide us with a safer AI environment or a more comprehensive AI environment. So there's a question at the back, and then all right, Christina, you go first.
Yes, it is that we could invite these people from top of these very valuable topics to us and know more what they do, what is going on, what's possible to do together.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of discussion I would like to have. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, my name is Miran. I've been in G leading AI programs since 1998. I did my degree in AI in Manchester University.
Right.
In the 80s. I'm in, and I hope everyone's in on your question let's do this. I've been working in Berkeley a lot over the last 15 years because that's where AI was. I spoke at many conferences over that. In the past 2 years, I thought I'm bored of traveling. And Manchester has it's not just the data centers and the wind and the water, but the curiosity. What else could be done differently? There is definitely a desire to beat whatever's done in London, which is great. I'm French myself, and I left France for many reasons, so the desire to beat the French is actually stronger in me than in me. I think that the timing is right also to ask what is the ethical question, what does symbolic mean, I think is completely the next generation. The question from you was good, was like the impact of the Industrial Revolution, mechanics. And I go back to this when I talk about AI. Before the Industrial Revolution, 50,000 hours to process a ton of cotton into fabric. After the Industrial Revolution, 20 years, 135 hours. This will be the same, but for information. The time it takes to process information to make potentially better decisions, which is what we call intelligence, is going to change a lot over the next 20 years. So very exciting time. I think it's not a big conversation like this. I think it's lots and lots of workshops. Those meetups are definitely part of that fabric. So thank you for bringing it.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Just thought I'm not an expert in this field, so forgive me if it's crazy, but the other alternative is to say, well, the ship's left, the genie's out of the bottle. There's lots of people who are well advanced in this phase. Why not look beyond the horizon and get ahead in related fields? Someone mentioned quantum computing. I think there's some pretty amazing advances in quantum computing right here in Manchester, where actually we could take the lead. I don't know about symbolic AI. I'm definitely going to follow up because that's interesting. I haven't come across it before. But are there fields in which Manchester can lead the way again, the way it did in your two industrial revolutions, rather than playing the game that's being played today, exciting as it sounds?
Mm. Yeah, super.
Just to, Miran's comment, your comment, I mean, I'll use graphene as the example, and we had a talk on graphene in one of the regular meetings.
Yeah.
Was developed here, but again, that ship has sailed. We don't do much commercialization. I don't know whether it's a similar situation with AI, but the question that comes to mind, linking it what Miran was saying, is for the large majority of the SMEs here in Greater Manchester, we have a significant productivity deficit relative to both the national average, but also if we pick individual cities like London. So one question for me is, how do we leverage AI? We may not necessarily have a data center, and I think that might be absolutely true. But the opportunity is still there, and where is that opportunity? What can Manchester's large SME community do to exploit AI to kind of narrow down that productivity deficit? Okay. And I don't have an answer to that.
No, I think I did actually think about having a slide at the end which said we're on the journey. I mean, I always have this discussion. We're on the journey. We've no idea where it's going really. I think, and I think you're right. I think this is probably an ongoing discussion. How can we provide better capability to small medium enterprise here in the Greater Manchester area? Certainly, one of the things that I had strongly felt was that the early application of AI in small medium enterprises has been done almost like thoughtlessly in a way, sort of thing that Jen was talking about. And actually, how can we create a secure environment that people can feel comfortable sort of working in? And really what I was looking at was, well, is there something that we can do specifically in that space? But again, I think there's a lot more discussions that maybe we need to have going forward, but I agree.
Thank you. My name is Isabel, and I graduated in February with a master's in AI. And I know that one of the things Manchester is famous for is IVF. I think it was invented somewhere around here. And one of the
Manchester Royal Infirmary.
Yes, it was.
By Sir Robert Edwards, yeah.
Yes, I remember that. So why not collaborate with the medical community in Manchester and figure out what we can use AI to assist with? The NHS is understaffed, it's this, it's that. So I'm sure if we are able to convince the very conservative leaders in the hospitals and MRI and co, there's something that we can do. Because the doctors in UCL are doing that exact medical AI related surgeries and things like that in London. So I used to live in London, so I just moved here. So I'm just wondering if that's the way we can progress.
I've got questions
Excellent,
about some of your experience with things, Adrian. My name's Rich. I used to be head of IT at an energy company in Manchester, and then I was head of AI for the wider group. And I saw that we're all talking about agentic AI, and I think 2025 was hyped as the year of agentic AI, and it kind of didn't happen. And I felt, as I was trying to bring AI into the business, that we were trying to, there was all that hype there that people were trying to run before they could walk. Mm. And now as I'm talking to, I'm independent now and I'm doing this consultancy work around AI. I'm talking to a lot of CIOs and CTOs, and there's a lot of barriers to what they want to do. So firstly, I've got two questions for you based on your experience now. If we did have these local data centres, do you think there'd be a demand for, you mentioned sovereignty, like for being able to have on-prem open weight models running for companies? Is that an issue that is blocking some companies, for example? The privacy concerns, the ownership? And the second one is, I'm seeing a lot of companies just almost, I don't mean in disrespect to Microsoft, but I see a lot of companies using Copilot, whereas I have never really considered Copilot to be a front runner. And it turns out they're doing that because it's easy to go into, it's contractual and financial reason really. It's easy to go in, I've actually been told it's easier to go in and press a button and turn on AI for someone than it is to go and start a new contract with Claude, for example.
Yeah.
So is that what you've seen too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's interesting enough, I mentioned, you go back to the people doing training locally, well, within the UK. Heather Murray, who's based in Birmingham, she announced last week that she was going Copilot. And previously she'd been effectively training on any of the models. And I think that's actually triggered by the fact that almost by stealth, Microsoft have implanted a path into AI, which actually people, don't have to do anything more than actually use it because it's on their laptop or server or whatever. Going back to your previous question, I mean, I sort of fairly strongly felt that we ought to have in the commercial sector, and it wouldn't just be commercial, it would be charities and maybe the local authority sector, to have actually a sovereign compute environment which could well be an open source based environment. I mean, we'd have to work out where we're going to get that model from, but one that was actually felt secure, that people could feel happy in sort of using. I think that would be a great asset. Whether it's financially easily affordable at the minute, I don't know. But I mean, clearly chip prices are going to be falling. I know that memory prices have gone the other way to stop that, sort of economy of scale actually working its way through. But assuming that chip prices and things do fall away, then it might become more and more possible. The other thing, of course, that's going on is smaller language models. I mean, one of the things I keep meaning to do but haven't done yet is actually download Gemma on my PC, and clearly Google have issued Gemma so that, similarly, we could actually use that on, that could be our own personal sort of agent environment, which hopefully would be relatively secure. I don't know 100% that it is, but that would be the expectation. I think the big challenge to Microsoft as well, though, that slightly worried me, was that I had been led to believe that if you're using Microsoft Copilot, that actually your data was, if you're in Microsoft 365, your data was sort of fairly secure. But actually, I noticed just by accident almost, there was a sudden change in terms and conditions that Microsoft had just sort of presented you with, just sort of effectively letting you know that in effect, your data will be used for training, and it isn't as secure as we had historically been led to believe. And I'm talking about something that I literally noticed almost by chance 2 or 3 weeks ago. Somehow I got this little message coming up saying, by the way, Microsoft has changed the terms and conditions, and by continuing to use this Microsoft product, you are accepting those terms and conditions. But I mean, I don't know if there's other thoughts that people have. Question back? Yeah?
Just a note, using AI in healthcare, and what's your background kind of like the pioneers using AI in healthcare? What about yourself? Have you been driving Copilot as a manager to create an AI agent helping with making new doctor? And to be honest, I use that, but it's a slow transition.
I'm sort of conscious that we've gone on perhaps a little bit longer than we normally do, but we have had 2 presentations. Sorry? 5 more minutes. Okay. Last couple of questions. Maybe Jack in then.
I'm Jack. I run all the digital stuff for the society, the AI meetings and the new meetings as well. We've just seen lots of people interested tonight taking pictures of slides. You can notice maybe all these live streams are published live, and you can go back and view them at any time. So we have our YouTube channel, it's the Manchester Statistical Society. So week. Tap that into YouTube, subscribe. Even if you can't come to a meeting, you can always watch it live, comment, and I can ask the questions to the speaker, and you can go back and check it and rewind and rewatch it if you'd like to. Yeah, that resource is out there for everyone.
Commercial there. Okay.
Yes, just to go back to the previous question. Another reason for Copilot was that Microsoft was at least the only one at the time that they were saying they're willing to go on a lawsuit, a copyright lawsuit against code generated by AI, because it is trained on other people's code. So they had to, whereas that what they were generating is protected by copyright laws. And I'm not sure if other companies do that, but it might be a blocker for bigger corporations. Also, not so much for maybe small and medium enterprises, because I've seen I work with a few of them, and they have never even asked the questions like that about copyright and the uniqueness of the answers. So it varies case by case.
Okay, time for one last question. No, we've run out. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Hopefully this has been a useful session. Many thanks again for attending. It's really good. Great to see the numbers growing. Obviously, we're trying to become the biggest regular monthly meetup in AI in the Manchester area. So many thanks indeed for all you coming. Okay.
Very good, Adrian. Thank you. Based on the popularity of the questions, continuing in a pub or somewhere afterwards.
Right, yeah.
It's your fault that it's not something you've traditionally done.
Not traditionally done, no, I think you're right.